Doug Peterson. Welcome to the show, Doug.
Hey, Dan, good to see you again.
It's always good to be seen. So I've got some great questions for you today. We're going to throw you a few curveballs. I'm just kidding. But before we do, would you mind playing us a little ditty on that guitar?
Yeah, it's just a
Okay,
prop.
fine. All right, just a prop. Just so you're telling me you don't know how to play the guitar.
Uh, a little bit.
Okay, you can get yourself in trouble.
The only reason I have that is so I can walk over and pick it up, and this looks like my real house when
If
it's
if
just a facade. But it gives me a prop.
Oh, that's good. I love it. So, all right, let's talk finances. How many people have a cash emergency fund? And quite frankly, if I needed, say I didn't have a cash emergency fund, how much would I allocate towards it?
Well, I'm not a financial advisor, but they'll tell you 3 to 6 months. You need to start where you are. So if you're a single person, having $500 helps, but you can spend $500 on a car repair out of the blue. So typically I get people up to 5,000, but then over time, slowly adding to it, get 3 to 6 months worth of survival income. And the people that have it, there are over 25% of people making over 150,000 that did not have an emergency fund at all. Literally they're paycheck to paycheck. And between 100 and 150,000, it's 37%. So it's a big number of people that don't have any cash reserves. And by the way, a credit card is something you can draw on, but it's not an emergency fund. It's debt.
It's debt, sure.
You got to pay off the debt.
Right. So it's not like you're tapping into money that's set aside. It's you're actually going negative.
Yep.
But it's yeah, I get that. All right. So on the average, do people know what it costs to live, or even what they spent last month on average?
Yeah, there's an article by Intuit that talked about over 65% of the people in the US don't know what they spent last month. And very few people know what it costs them to live. And they're not taking into account things like car expenses that they've already committed to. And we don't think about it, but an average used car, any used car, except for expensive ones, is going to run about 150 a month over 5 years. So if you're not setting aside 150 a month, you're probably going to get an $8 to $12 to $1,500 bill you weren't prepared for at some point. And it's things like home maintenance and yard maintenance and license tabs and insurances that come up every 6 months, Christmas, vacation. When people really factor in everything that they do spend, they realize they're about 25 to 50% short in what they think they're spending. It's a big number.
So from a standpoint of best practices, if somebody were to say, yeah, I don't have an emergency fund, what is one thing they can do today just to get started on creating an emergency fund?
Well, the first thing you do is just look at your expenses and begin. It's just like paying yourself first. Take something, take $25, take $50 and start building it. Count it as a real expense, but you set it aside so that you have it. Now, so many people just set it aside in another bank account so they can not spend it. I use a program called YNAB that allows you to set aside virtually, so you know that you've already given that money a job and it's not available to spend.
Yeah, and I think that whole separate account thing is out of sight, out of mind, right? And I've got mine set up where it just automatically drafts a certain amount every month into that account. So I'm not using a YNAB product, but I look at my bank account, it's not there, it's over in my reserve fund account. So it's maybe a different strategy, but it's something that you can just start with 25 and then next month do 50. And then the month after that, do a little bit more just as something.
But on that point, I'm looking at efficiencies too, making it as little work as possible. And knowing where things are. The fewer bank accounts you have, bank accounts to balance, the easier it is. So you not only want to manage your finances and really control your cash flow, but you don't want to spend extra time.
And if I get that, but to play devil's advocate, if I look at my account and it says I have $10,000, even though it's earmarked, I may just spend it.
That's because
stop you from doing that.
That's because you're doing something called checkbook budgeting. You look at how much money you have and say, I've got plenty. But if you've already set aside everything for all the things I mentioned earlier, that might be $1,200 or $1,500, and your emergency fund is another $5,000. You may only have $1,000 or $500 left. And since if you use my program, you don't even have that, because you put it in your vacation fund or something else, a fund fund. So
Right.
I
So
really
you
work at
have to
getting away from,
change the way you look at it, right?
yeah, it's a different mindset. We don't want to do checkbook balance budgeting because it just doesn't work. You don't know what you've already committed to those dollars to, and how it's like time management. You know, if you look at all the things you've already committed to and start mapping it out on a calendar, how much time do you have left?
Yeah, it can be really tight at that point.
Almost none usually,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially if you have kids
Yeah. And if
and
you
a
want to sleep
job
at night.
and a marriage
Yeah.
and a
Yeah.
life.
So what about stress and money? Tell us about the correlation between those two.
This is one of the reasons I started this. I was working with executives doing executive coaching and mentoring for 20 years, and I have helped over 25 executives who were losing their health, were losing their marriage, or their business was struggling, all because of cash flow challenges. And it really came back to our last point. They were spending money before they built enough reserves. And if you think of your business or your personal money as a body, you need blood, and you need extra blood in case you lose some blood. Well, there's an awful lot of people that say, we've got money, let's spend it. Instead of delaying that gratification just a little bit, how would you like to have 20 real estate investors that have cash? You know, it'd
Love
be,
it. Love to have
you
that.
have a lot more choices, right? So,
Yeah.
so you have to have some cash, both personally and in your business, to be able to make the best choices and proactively decide where your monies go before you spend it, instead of wondering where it went or why you don't have very much.
Well, and I understand that a lot of that, I mean, finances is probably the top two things in a relationship that causes stress. How does using a system like this help alleviate that stress?
Well, in relationships, a lot of it's opinion. We can't afford that. Well, afford it compared to what? Compared to your country club membership at the golf course, which I don't want, but you want, assuming you and I were married,
Right. Sure. I get it.
which we're no longer.
No, we are not.
Not anymore. It just didn't go well.
No.
But what we're talking about here is now saying we've already given every dollar a job. So which bucket does it come out of? Should it come out of our vacation, our home improvement, our yard maintenance, our dining out, our wine budget, our grocery budget? Then it's a matter of, well, I don't want it to take out of any of those things. Well, then can you afford it? If nothing else, everything else is more important than this new thing you want, maybe you don't need it or want it. And it takes it from the emotional to the rational. Now it's just, well, where should we get the money from? Not, I have 10,000 in my bank account, we can use some of that, because we've already decided where all 10,000 is going.
Yeah, I just want to be clear for those watching that Doug is he's not a financial advisor. He's also not a marriage counselor, but I do understand that his conversations do help marriages. Is that correct?
Oh man, I have had people say we never talked about money because it was so hard. And now they talk about it very easily, and they don't have to talk about it a lot because they know where they stand. It makes a huge difference. And I thought if I could figure this out, I would be a bajillionaire, because wouldn't it be great? There's 57% of divorces are money related.
Are money related. I believe that.
And
Yeah.
it's not necessary. This is something that works 100% of the time, and you can master it.
Oh, awesome. All right. So let's talk about debt and what is okay and what should you avoid?
Well, everybody's going to give it a different opinion, but any of assets that appreciate on a really simple level are okay, because they're actually gaining in value. You have to look at the amount of interest you're paying. But I believe strongly that any consumer debt that you're paying interest on things that depreciate, including cars, which I understand are expensive, I would rather have you buy a cheaper car, save money, and then buy another car that's more expensive and sell your cheaper car, than have you go out and get a BMW and just lose 20, 25% as you drive it off the lot. So
Yeah,
anything that depreciates, that'd be an investment property or your own property, investments, that's okay debt. Now, by the way, don't go into debt.
I was waiting for you to say investment property, Doug. Thank you for.
Yeah, but don't go into debt for investments, because you might be paying a lot of interest on that debt. I've had people just putting into their 401k, but they're carrying 25% interest on their credit cards. Well,
No.
let's get the credit card interest gone and then start putting money in, because you're still going backwards. But investments, this is what people don't realize, that if you can live within your means for a long time, you can really build wealth. And if you live within your means, you can build your investment portfolio as well and build some passive income.
Yeah, and for those of you listening or watching this, talking about this, I mean, really, it is great to feel comfortable about your debt, or excuse me, about your financial situation, and it's even better to make money while you're sleeping. And putting Doug's principles into action is a catalyst for you being able to make some financial choices that put you in positions to buy investment properties, which I would have to, I don't know if you can agree with me or not. It really does depend on certain individuals, but it's probably the number one most stable way to grow wealth in the long term is to be on a plan and then invest in properties that pay you a positive cash flow every day at night while you're sleeping. I can't think of any better situation. And when you look at real estate, it's not just the income that you make, but it's the appreciation and the depreciation that you can use against tax returns. So there's a lot of real good benefits, and it really does start with the principles that Doug's talking about here today.
Yeah. And to also add to that, you need staying power. So we have had downturns in the market and people have been underwater, but it's come back. And over the last 90 years, I think the average appreciation has been 5 or 6%, something like that,
Yeah.
over the entire time. It's amazing how consistent it's been if you can wait it out. And also,
Yeah.
don't just think about investments as I have to buy a separate property. We decided to upgrade our house and decided to rent out our basement for 5 years. Well, we made an extra $120,000 in our own
Well,
home. So you can
and
buy a
there
house
are,
with an ADU
yeah.
possibility in it and then cover a bunch of your mortgage while you've got a
Yeah,
larger house appreciating.
Yeah, there's places in Seattle and the surrounding Eastside areas that allow for what's called a dadu, which is an additional dwelling unit on the same property. So you can use that strictly for, a college student that is needing an affordable place to stay, or a couple that are aging and they don't want to go, they don't want a whole house. They want just a nice little tiny home. I actually sitting in on a seminar tomorrow about some of the creative things that are being done with these ADUs, or DADUs as some of the nicknames are called. All right, so let's get back to some practical tips. So how can you know where your money is being spent?
The only way is you have to track it. And it's easy. So many people think that's a bunch of work, but it's 10 to 20 seconds after you make a decision of something you want to buy and you put it in your phone. And there's a very inexpensive app. YNAB's the best one, but there's others. Now, the important thing is, though, if you know where your money's being spent, you're not managing it unless you know how much you have left for that month. If you're
It's
just
almost like
tracking it,
gamification at that point, right?
yeah, if you're just tracking it, it's record keeping. So people go, oh yeah, I've got Quicken, I've got all this stuff, but I don't ever look at it. It's just telling you how much you spent, but without any thought at all.
Okay, and how does somebody find that app?
It's YNAB. It stands for You Need a Budget, or you can just go to Doug at getprioritystraight.com and I'll send you a link for it. But they have a 34-day free trial, and that's one of the tools I use in the work I do.
Okay. Okay, so why is it that you think people give up on budgeting?
We have made our lives so complicated, and the financial industry has done a tremendous job at hiding costs. Anything you buy on Amazon says Amazon on it, on your credit card statement. Anything you do with Venmo says Venmo. You have subscriptions. It just seems like too much work for too little return, right? I sat down and I figured it all out and I know where I stand today, but a month later, where do I stand? So you need a good system so that you're keeping track of things in a way that takes less than 2 hours a month to manage all your finances, balance all your accounts, pay all your bills, and be able to plan. And it takes a little bit of work to get organized. Think of your messy garage, and now you've cleaned it up, and it took a lot of work to clean it up and get rid of stuff, but now you can find stuff. Now it's efficient. You no longer know you had it somewhere, but
Awesome.
can't find it.
All right. So, Doug, I really appreciate you joining us today. If the listeners or watchers would like to reach out to you, you can go to his website at getprioritiesstraight.com or set up a complimentary consultation at schedulewithdoug.com. That's a new site, Schedule with Doug.
Yeah, it just takes you right to my calendar, and you can either see my phone number or you can schedule a 10, 25, or 40-minute meeting.
You know, when I think of that website, Schedule with Doug, I think of the movie. What is it? Home Away, Home. Where is the dog? Doug. Hey,
Dog Doug.
Squirrel. Yeah,
Squirrel.
the dog Doug. Squirrel. Yeah, Schedule with Doug. I get to see Doug. Sorry,
Maybe schedule with squirrel.com. We should
Schedule with Squirrel. Doug. Is that what's the name of that movie? It's Up. Sorry.
Yeah, it was Up.
Up, where his house, like that's a homeowner's, like, you know, the house, they relocate it using balloons. It's kind of great. Well, Doug, again, thank you so much for coming on our show. I really appreciate the conversation. It is an invaluable asset to get your priorities straight, and Doug is fantastic at what he does. So I encourage anybody listening to reach out to him and alleviate stress, have a better marriage, have all the money to invest. There's all kinds of positive outcomes that can come from meeting with Doug. So please reach out to him. We are always looking for great small businesses on the East Side to feature. And I told you guys I was in Kansas City, and I'm looking forward to some Kansas City barbecue tonight, and that it did relate back to the East Side and Seattle's East Side podcast. So a few years ago, my son was looking for some extracurricular activities. Having grown tired of running so much, playing soccer, he decided to quit. And I said, listen, you got to do something. You can't just, sit around and play video games all day. You got to do something. So pick something. And he threw out the term rugby. Hey, I'd like to do rugby. And I think what he was thinking when he said that was, there's no way in heck my dad is going to find anything with rugby for me to do. So he's going to have to send me to Australia, and which has been something he's always wanted to do. Well, it just so happens that a gentleman that was helping one of my clients close a loan, I read in his LinkedIn profile, and it says that he is the president of the Eastside Lions Rugby Club. I was like, well, let me ask him about it. So after about an hour conversation with him telling me how amazing rugby is and it's a great community, we ended up heading out, and I think my son was entering 8th grade, heading out to a summer sevens rugby team in Bellevue. So he went and had a great time, and then winter came along and went out for the 15s. And so the Eastside Lions is a club, a private club that compromises players all around the Eastside and Seattle. It has a pretty storied history. As a matter of fact, back in, it's 2021. So this was back in 2018. The club took a tour to Ireland and played 3 matches against 3 seasoned Irish clubs and beat them all. And then that following year, not that same year, but the year after that, they ended up going to the Nationals in Salt Lake City and placed 3rd in the nation. So they were invited back the next year, but the next year was 2020, COVID year. So my son was really disappointed to not be able to play last year. But the club was invited back this year. So I am in Kansas City with the Eastside Lions Rugby Club, who is going to be playing for the national championship. So we'll keep you all posted on Facebook of how things go. Their first match is tomorrow. And it is about 90 degrees with about 80% humidity. So it's going to be quite the different match than it would be in the Northwest. It's hot and muggy, so it's gonna be tough for the big boys. So anyways, we'll look for our posts on Facebook, and that's some of the culture. If you know of any kids wanting to get out, it's co-ed. They have guys teams, girls teams. They can come out and play. Feel free to reach out to us. So that is our show. We just want to thank you all for watching. And if you decide now is the right time to buy or sell on the East Side, connect. Let's discuss. You can reach out to us. Our website is the eastsiderealestateteam.com, and our number is 425-200-4093. Thanks to our guest, Doug Peterson with Get Priorities Straight. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful week.